Hello and welcome back to Reading with Mo. Today I'm coming at you guys with my worst slash most disappointing reads of 2023. Now, I have over the years of my reading experience been pretty good at being able to kind of hone in my reading tastes, and I'm pretty good at picking up books that I really enjoy, but I am not perfect, and sometimes some books I pick up I end up regretting or I end up disliking. And some books I finish, I end up wishing maybe I had not read them and could have my time back instead. So that's what this video is going to be all about, is the books the books that gave me that feeling during 2023. I'm going to be sharing with you my DNFs, which mean the books that I did not finish, and the books that I actually finished and rated low. So my 1 is to 2-star reads. I don't give a lot of 1-star reads often, like hardly ever, but I did have one last year. So I have 7 books that are going to be my worst books of 2023, and then I have 8 books that were DNFs. So let's go ahead and start with the DNFs. Fortunately, only 4 books from both lists total were books that lived on my bookshelf. So that's a good sign that out of the, I don't know how many books I read physically from my shelves, but of the 100+ books that I finished last year, only 4 of those from my shelves were books that I disliked. And with both of these lists, neither of these are going to be in any particular order, just the order that I happened to write them down in. So also something with both of these lists, I'm probably not going to have a ton to say about each of these books because I don't choose to hold on to these feelings. For one, if I rate a book and I didn't enjoy it, it's just like poof, out of my mind, forgetting about it, we're moving on to the next thing. And when it comes to books I didn't finish, I'm also not going to have as much to say because clearly I didn't finish the book. I'm going to let you guys know what their average Goodreads rating is as well, so maybe if these books sound interesting to you and maybe you will want to pick them up. When it comes to my DNFs, sometimes I rate them, sometimes I don't. It all just really depends on the mood that the book has put me in, whether I'm feeling generous and just marking it as read, or if I'm really disliking it and I do decide to give it a rating, because I'm like, if I finish this book, this is probably what my rating is going to be. So first up, we have The Black House, which I ended up giving a 2-star rating to. This is by Carol Johnstone. Its average Goodreads rating is a 3.46, so there's a good amount of people who have enjoyed this book. It's described as an atmospheric thriller on an isolated Scottish island where nothing is as it seems and shocking twists lie around every corner. There's a remote village, a deadly secret, an outsider who knows the truth. I remember putting this book down because while I did find the writing interesting, I was just really bored. I felt like there wasn't really much that interested me or compelled me enough to continue on with this story. So I could potentially be open to another book by this author in the future. I would be very hesitant though, just because I obviously wasn't enjoying this book and decided to put it down. Overall, it was a bit slow. I was kind of bored, so yeah, this one wasn't for me. Next up, we have a book that was very surprising for me that I DNF'd because this book was a reread for me, and that is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. I picked this book up years ago, and then I just never got around to finishing it's a duology, so I had both of them on my shelves. I figured, let me just like knock out the series real quick. It's a young adult historical alternative history slash like science fiction fantasy. I don't know, it kind of blends a whole bunch of different genres all together. I remember the first time I read it, I believe I gave it like a 3-star rating. With it being 5 years since I had read this book, I needed to reread it to refresh my memory so I can read the sequel. But unfortunately, I could just not get through it. Maybe I'm just past this age range, which could be the case, but it just didn't really hold my attention. I found myself being bored. The average rating on Goodreads is a 4.14, and I feel like this book definitely does have an audience for it, just not me. I could have continued on and finished the book. It wouldn't have been that difficult, but I just knew I wasn't going to rate it highly, so what was the point of spending the time reading 2 whole books that I just wasn't super crazy about? With the average rating being a 4.14, I'm definitely in the minority with this. With me giving it 3 stars the first time I read it, it means I probably thought it was just okay, and I should have just like not even have attempted to purchase the second book and continue on with the duology. This book is pretty much a mashup between a Civil War story in the United States and a zombie apocalypse is the simplest way to describe it. And we have Hourglass by Kieran Goddard. I rated this one 2 stars, didn't finish it. Its average rating on Goodreads is 3.22. This book is a debut novel, and it's told in like these short diary forms. It's Very lyrical, just not really something for me. I remember being very confused and not even understanding what was the purpose of the book or what the story was or what was going on, so I did not continue on with this. Next up, we have Stealing by Margaret Verbal. I gave this one a rating of 2 stars, did not finish it. Its average rating on Goodreads is a 4.08. And I know I'm definitely in the minority for this. This book definitely has its audience, just not me. I do not like reading books from the perspective of a child. It's rarely, never for me do I say I love it. I can tolerate it occasionally, but I've never truly liked a book that has the perspective of a child. That's meant for an adult audience, an adult book, but told from the perspective of a kid. It just isn't something I enjoy reading. So it probably already was in the cards for me to like this book, but I really wanted to because it sounded very interesting. It's about a Cherokee child who's taken from her family and sent to a Christian boarding school in the 1950s. It really has potential. It's just, that storytelling type just isn't for me. Then we have Leech by Hiran Inez, I think is how you say the last name, and I gave it a 2-star rating. On Goodreads, its average rating is a 3.61. This book falls into the categories of like horror, science fiction, kind of gothic, and I did not finish this one. It's described as it takes place in an isolated chateau, and they were following the Baron's doctor who has died, and his replacement has a mystery to solve, figuring out how the Institute lost track of one of its bodies. The writing and the storytelling just really didn't flow for me in a way that I enjoyed. I really wanted to like this book. It sounded very interesting from reading the synopsis, but I just knew I could have pushed through and finished it, maybe given it a 3-star rating, but I decided to just put it down. Next up, we have The Sellout, which I gave, actually I lied to you guys at the beginning of the video. I gave 2 books that I'm going to talk about a 1-star rating, and The Sellout by Paul Beatty has an average rating on Goodreads of 3.75. I gave it a 1-star read. This is one of the ones I actually physically owned, and I took this on me. I specifically, vividly remember I took this with me on vacation in, I think when I flew down to like Southern California for the weekend, and I remember reading it while I was just relaxing down there, and I remember the first 30 maybe so pages, I enjoyed the writing, but then it kind of just lost me. It lost me so terribly. I really just I tried to push through this book so many times. I would sit down and I was just not enjoying my time reading it, and that's when I knew I just need to give up on it. Maybe satire in novels just isn't it for me. That's, I think, what I'm discovering. I feel like the book was just really trying to sound a little bit funny, trying to sound smart, but maybe, I don't know, I was just lost. It went over my head. I found myself being really bored. I didn't understand what was going on or what was the point. Our main character, his father has just passed away, and he thought he was writing this memoir that was going to financially save them, but it turns out he gets killed in some sort of police shootout and doesn't end up with anything but the bills for it. So for some reason, he decides that he's going to reinstate slavery and segregate the local high school, which puts him in with the Supreme Court. I don't know. I didn't even get that far into the plot because it was such a slog. I could not push through, and I didn't think it was going to get any better. I just really did not gel with this writing style at all. Next up, we have a short story collection, which I think this is one of the few that maybe only that I picked up last year. I didn't rate this. I gave it no rating on Goodreads, but on Goodreads, the average rating is 3.79, and that is Inard Stories by Magogodi. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last 2 words because I feel like I will butcher it, but you can see the picture here. I didn't get very far into this short story collection. I just very quickly going into it knew that it was not a book that I was going to rate probably more than 3 stars, and I was trying to push myself and I wasn't really getting into it. And when it comes to short stories collections, even though they're usually not that long, if you're not into it, they will take forever to read, and I just want to cut my losses because I wasn't enjoying myself. I wasn't really caring for the writing too much, so I wanted to move on. Lastly, for the DNFs, we have Madalena and the Dark by Julia Fine. This is another one I also decided not to rate, but the average rating on Goodreads is 3.42. This book is set during 18th century Venice, and it takes place at a musical school. It's very prestigious, and we're following 2 girls who are drawn together by a dangerous wager. It takes place in 1717, and our main character Louisa is 15. She's wanted to be the best at violin. I felt like I was reading a lot of writing and not very much was happening. I just found myself checked out, completely bored with the story, so I DNF'd this one. So those are it for the DNFs. Now let's go on to the 7 other books I want to mention that were technically like my worst books of the year. So next we have the books that were the worst of 2023 for me. Books that I actually fully completed and still decided that I had wasted my time and that I did not like these books and I could not recommend them. So we have 7 of those to talk about. The first one is Shy by Max Porter. I gave this book a 1-star rating, but the average on Goodreads right now is at a 3.69. This was a 2023 release, and I had heard of other books by this author, Lanny, and Grief is the Thing with Feathers, and I've heard pretty generally good reception of those, so I decided might as well I would just pick up the latest thing he's written, see how I liked it. And the answer was no. I did not like this book. I strongly disliked this book. I didn't like the main character. The main thing is, it's not even that I dislike the main character, who is a troubled teen and takes place over one night and he's running away from this home that he lives in. It's the storytelling style, very stream of conscious, very much just a storytelling style that does not gel with me. I was listening to this one, I believe, on audiobook, and I just couldn't, it wasn't even that long, and I think I finished it just because it was like so short, but I couldn't really tell you too much about what was happening because it's just not a style, like as I've said many times, that I am into. But if you are into more like experimental storytelling styles and just like to try those stuff out for fun, then I guess this is who I would recommend that to. Next up, we have Spring Garden, which I gave a 2-star rating to on Goodreads. The average is a 3.27. This is a book in translation. The author is Tomoka Shibasaki, but the translator is Polly Barton. This book was short enough that I felt like I could finish it and it wouldn't be too much of a waste of my time if I didn't enjoy it. Overall, it was just very boring. I didn't really understand what the point of this book was. None of the characters really stood out to me. We're following a man named Taro, who is divorced and cut off from his family. He lives alone in this apartment building where it's going to be torn down as soon as all of the last tenants leave. He keeps himself, but he finds himself in this weird relationship with the woman upstairs, and she's passing on the strange tale of the sky blue house next door. All of it I just found very boring and very much just like, what was the point of this? I really don't get it. Next up, we have another story that is a book in translation, and that is Stga by Johan Licom, and the translator is Saskia Vogel. I gave this one a 2-star rating on Goodreads. Its average is a 3.24. This book was described as a modern Gothic story of 9 young women sent to work at a remote alpine hotel, and what happens when one of them goes missing. Now, the premise for this sounded so interesting, right? These women are hired on as seasonal workers to work at a hotel, and every day they put their uniforms on, they live in like shared dorms, they're getting ready to perform the role and prepare the hotel for the guests, but no guests ever show up. Eventually, the hotel gets filled up one day for a party, and then one of the women disappear. The book, I will say the writing itself wasn't bad. I just really felt like it was kind of just like one of those weird books. It was atmospheric, but at the same time, I don't know, I just didn't really like it as I was reading it, even though the writing wasn't terrible. Well, I can say that the writing wasn't terrible. It was another book that I found myself feeling like, what was the point? Like, not really much happened. Even though from the synopsis it sounds like something's going to be happening, it just didn't really feel very purposeful. It was kind of weird and strange, but just at the end of the day, I just didn't feel like nothing even really happened. Next up, we have a book that I was sent a review copy of, and that is The Survivalist by Kashana Colley. I gave this book a 2-star rating, and this has a pretty low Goodreads rating as well. It is a 2.98. This was another book that left me feeling at the end kind of like, what was the point? And like, it was a little bit of a waste of time reading this book. We're following our main character, Aretha, and she ends up moving in with her boyfriend, who his job is he sells coffee. And his 2 roommates also live in the house, and they're very weird. They're like these doomsday prepper type people. One of them is literally building a bunker in the backyard. It's kind of just like her being around them and then being influenced by them. I don't know. It just was very, I feel like it's a little harsh to say, but a little bit pointless. I didn't understand the point of this book. I think this also falls within the lines of when a book tries to be funny or tries to be comedic, and I just feel like it falls flat for me. It just doesn't hit for me. Next up, we have Conspirator by Veronica Roth. I gave this 2 stars. Its average on Goodreads is 3.43. This is a dystopian book, and it's a reimagining of the story of Antigone, which I'm not really familiar with, but it was a very short, I believe I listened to this on like audiobook. This book is a science fiction book. I just never really got into it. I tried and I couldn't even really tell you what this was about because of how much it just really didn't leave a memorable impression on me at all. It takes place on supposedly like the last city on Earth, and the planet's a wasteland. There's this place called the Archive, and that's where the genes of the dead are stored. When someone passes into the Archive, it's supposed to be a cause for celebration, but Antigone's parents were murdered, so it's leaving her father's throne vacant. With her father passing, she is taken in by her uncle, who is trying to take over the throne. That's basically the gist of the story, and I just found myself not really caring or connecting with any of these characters. I had read by Veronica Roth before the Divergent series, and so I hadn't read anything else by her, so I kind of wanted to see, like, especially since this was pretty new, I think this is her most recent release, if I would like other things written by her, but I just think that we're gonna probably just leave it at the Divergent series. Next up, we have Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. I gave this book a 2-star rating. Its average on Goodreads is a 3.3. This book had a lot of potential, and I think a reason why I gave it such a low rating was I just had so high hopes for it, and I felt like it had so much more potential than what I was given. It's following the story that is actually based kind of like around a real unsolved mystery that took place in 1951, which was the mass poisoning of a French village. This author also previously wrote that, and I read The Water Cure, and there's one more book, Blue Ticket. Both of those books, I believe I rated about 3-star rating. So as much as I really want to be into Sophie McIntosh's books, like I definitely don't mind her writing, I just end up not really liking the stories. So I think at this point, as we're 3 books in, and I gave The Water Cure 4-star rating, but I feel like if I were to reread it again, I probably wouldn't. I actually unhauled it pretty recently because I just had no desire to pick it back up again. And I gave Blue Ticket last year a 2-star rating. So I think that I'm just going to call it quits with Sophie McIntosh's books unless something else she comes out with really, really intrigues me. But when it came to this French village where there's this mass poisoning, some people think that it's because there was spoiled bread. Some think it was because of government testing. The story follows the baker's wife, and there's a new couple that moves next door that she kind of becomes involved with. And that whole like dynamic is what really lost me. Like I wasn't really interested in that, and I found that pretty boring. So yeah, wouldn't recommend this book at all. So last but not least, we have The Cherished by Patricia Ward. I gave this one a 2-star rating on Goodreads. Right now, its average is at a 2.96. So out of all of these, there's only 2 on Goodreads that are in a 2. And I feel like I rarely ever see books on Goodreads with lower than a 3.0 rating. So I feel like that is a really bad sign. Even if you look at the reviews here, a lot of low ratings, a lot of DNFs. So I feel like I'm definitely not in the minority with my feelings on this book. It's described as a horror thriller. We're following a girl who inherits a mysterious house from her grandma, and it comes with a letter with these instructions she has to follow. There's something I want to mention, but I see it's not mentioned in the book description, so I don't know if me mentioning it will be a spoiler, so I'm just gonna hold myself back from saying anything about that. When it comes down to it, I didn't find the story good, I didn't find the writing good, and I don't think I'll be picking up anything else by this author. But the book cover is really nice if we want to say something good. This is definitely what drew me into being interested in picking this book up in the first place. So those were all of my disappointing and worst books of 2023. Fortunately, the list wasn't super long. Like I was kind of expecting to talk about like 10 worst books and 10 DNFs, but I actually had less than that, so that was good. While I might not have been picking up a lot of books that were all-time favorites, I also wasn't picking up a lot of books that were just completely terrible. To only have this many books out of the over 100 that I got to last year, I am pretty proud of. Even more so this year, I want to make sure that I am DNFing books that I am not enjoying. So my goal is to not even give any 1 or 2-star ratings to any books because, or at least have finished. My goal is not to have finished a book and then still give it a 1 or 2-star rating. Like if I'm going to give it that rating, I would ideally prefer to have DNF'd it before I even got to the end of the book, or differing views and readings than I did. Also, let me know if you guys read any books last year that you really disliked as well. And that's it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. I think my next video that's going to be going up is my most anticipated books that are coming out in the next 3 months. So I'm really excited to share those with you guys. I have a very long list, so keep a lookout for that, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.